This is lecture number 1 for History 321, the French Revolution for Northland College in the spring of 2020. This lecture is for Monday, April 27th. I'm just going to go over the course introduction for you today and talk about some of the big questions we're going to be asking in this course, and to sort of talk about the fact that this course is going to be about historical theory. So I need to explain sort of what that means. So I guess the first thing is I just want to run over the syllabus really quickly. You basically have, your grade is based on 3 things in this course. One is there's going to be 3 reading responses, and these are short essays, 1 to 2 pages, where you're going to be either summarizing or responding to the readings for that week. And they're listed in the syllabus, but basically there are 3 of them. And what I'm looking for is you to show me not only that you read the readings, but also to start thinking, show me that you are really responding to the readings and connecting them to other readings and to the facts in the course. So this is really your chance to show me that you're putting it all together. The second part of your grade, so the 3 reading responses are going to be 30% of your grade, 10% each. Then the second part of your grade is they're going to be 2 papers, 2 8-page papers. They're due roughly in the second and fourth weeks, at the end of the course. And the assignments for those papers are up on the course website on mycourses.northland.edu. Incidentally, there's also a handout on the reading responses on mycourses.northland.edu. And so the 2 prompts for the 2 papers are up there. The question I want you to answer is up there. And I'll talk more about that later in the course. Third part of your grade is just participation, and that's anything that shows me that you are really engaged in the course. So we're going to have the voluntary optional video chats, and if you show up to those, that'll help your participation grade. If you don't show up, it won't necessarily hurt your participation grade. But also sending me emails helps your participation grade. Anything really that shows me that you are engaged in the class and are interested in it will help your participation grade. Anything that shows me that you really are not interested in the class, like if you turn in everything late at the end or something, or I never see or hear from you, that might hurt your participation grade. Okay, so that's the 3 reading responses are 10% each for 30%. Each paper is 30%, and then participation is 10%. So that's your whole grade in the course. For the readings, we're going to be reading basically, there are 3 books that you should have. The first is Contesting the French Revolution by Paul Hansen. And this is basically just a textbook for you. It includes an overview of the French Revolution and some of the key questions of the French Revolution. You're going to want to use that for the papers because you're going to need quotes and things for the papers, and that's a good source for that. The second one is When the King Took Flight by Tim Tackett. And we're going to read all of that one. That's the second thing we're going to read. And then the third is The Terror by David Andrus. You should buy all those or get access to them somehow from the library or something, because we're not going to read all of the Andrus. We're going to read about half of it. We're going to read all of the Hansen and all of the Tackett. There will also be reading handouts on the paper. The syllabus lists a number of handouts, and you'll find those on the course website on mycourses.northland.edu. Incidentally, when you go there, when you go to My Courses, you're going to see a list of courses. You'll click on this one, and you'll get basically a page that doesn't have anything on it. It's going to be a blank page. But you'll see on the left-hand side that there is a column, and if you click on Resources in that left-hand column, you'll see most of the resources for this course. You'll see the syllabus. You'll see the paper assignments. You'll see the description of the reading responses. You'll see a paper grading rubric. You'll see instructions on how to do citations and quotations for the papers. You'll see all sorts of stuff. In addition, all the readings are there. So if anything says handout in the syllabus, go to mycourses.northland.edu, click on resources, go to the bottom, their reading handouts are down there. And all of my lecture notes. I put up an outline for every lecture that I give up on mycourses.northland.edu. You're welcome to look at those, download those, and if you need to in a paper, you can quote those. Okay, and I'll talk about how to quote those in a later lecture. All right, so that's the nuts and bolts of the course. The one other thing is we're going to have video chats. Those will be live video chats on Big Blue Button. For those who go to the course website on mycourses.northland.edu, go down on the left side, you'll see chat, and you click on that, and I'll announce those times later. I haven't quite decided. I'm still waiting to hear from people about what times work for them, but I'll announce what times those are going to happen. Those will probably happen twice a week. And that's an opportunity for you to come help your participation grade, but also to ask any questions or to get me talking about the readings or any topic you want to relating to the French Revolution. All right, so that's the course. Now I want to just turn to, the course is about the French Revolution. So, why are we studying the French Revolution? What's so big about the French Revolution? Well, the French Revolution is really a watershed moment in Western civilization, not just French history, but in Western civilization. It really, in a lot of ways, the French Revolution, because it spilled beyond France and destroyed monarchies all across Europe, it really, in a lot of ways, destroyed what the French call the Ancien Regime, the former regime. This idea of having peasants and nobles and a really powerful church and having absolute monarchy, all those ideas were from the Middle Ages onward, were the backbone, the foundation of European society. But those all got destroyed in the French Revolution. And after the French Revolution, you have a totally different conception of what a government is. You have a totally different organization of society. And in a lot of ways, the French Revolution is this break point where European society changed, and to a certain extent, Western civilization changed. Although in the United States, of course, the American Revolution was more important in that score. So we're going to be studying the French Revolution, and we're going to be looking at it not only as a series of events, but also as a sort of a sea change in how Western civilization was organized. But we're going to be doing something else in this class. This class is going to be focused on historical theory. Now, you might not realize this. I mean, a lot of you, if you took a high school history class, it often seemed like history was simply a whole bunch of facts, right? You just had to memorize a bunch of facts about the past, and that's what it was. That's history. But in fact, history really has a different function. History is really about trying to learn from the past and figure out how to handle things in the future based on how things worked in the past. So if something worked really well in the past, you want to try to imitate that. If something didn't work well at all, you want to figure out what went wrong and not do that. But in the larger sense, history is a way for us to study and understand why things happen in society, right? Why does change happen? Why do revolutions happen, right? And so lots of people have theories about what causes change in society. And so we're going to be looking at different theories that historians had, or to put it slightly differently, we're going to be looking at a bunch of different historians and how they explain the French Revolution. And each of them has different things that they think are important about the French Revolution. And they have different theories about why revolutions happen and why they go the way they go. And so we're going to be studying not only the facts of the French Revolution, we're going to be looking at theories that historians have about why revolutions happen and why they go the way they go. And so we're really going to have to be thinking on two different levels. On the one level, we're going to be thinking, well, what's happening in the French Revolution? But on the other level, we're going to be saying, what does this tell us about what's important in a revolution, why change happens in history, and why human societies do what they do? What can we learn about human nature and the bigger questions? And which theory, we're going to give you several theories, which theory seems to best describe the way you understand society working? So the class is going to be happening on a couple different levels, and I'm going to be asking you to talk about and write about these things on these different levels. So you're going to have to be thinking about it, and some of the readings are a little bit hard to figure out because the reading is just talking about the French Revolution, but it's using a theory about why change happens or why revolutions happen or what's important in society. And we're going to have to tease out what that theory is based on how the person is talking about the French Revolution. So that's why this is a 300 level course, because it's complicated. It's intellectually a bit challenging in that sense. So we're going to be, I want you to keep in mind multiple levels, and I'll try to make it clear in these lectures what the different levels are that I'm talking about. But first of all, we're going to have, I mean, if you think about the French Revolution and you think, well, what can this tell us about human history? Or what can this tell us beyond just the facts of the French Revolution? What can this tell us about bigger questions, right, that we could apply to other parts of history, or that we could use going forward to try to predict the future or to understand how to act in the future? Well, there's a number of questions that the French Revolution brings up. One is just what causes revolutions, right? I mean, most of the time societies don't have revolutions, and lots of societies go hundreds and hundreds of years without a revolution, and then one happens, right? What is it? What's the collection of events or forces that cause a revolution to suddenly explode and change everything, right? So when we're looking at the French Revolution, that's one thing we're going to be asking is, in general, for revolutions, what are the forces that come together and cause a revolution to happen? Because if we can identify what maybe the preconditions of a revolution are, or maybe we can identify which are the key forces that drive a revolution, we might be able to predict a revolution in the future. Right? We might be able to see one coming and head it off if we don't want it, or maybe make it come faster if we do want it. But understanding the process of what causes a revolution will help us navigate the future, because we'll understand what makes revolutions happen. The second big part is, during the French Revolution, there was a period of a couple of years called the Terror, where, not to put too fine a point on it, they were killing everybody. Right? The guillotine was going, hundreds of people a day were being executed in Paris, there were mass executions in the provinces, and people were getting killed for very, without due process, and for really reasons that we would today call pretty shaky. And a lot of people said, well, that's what happens in revolutions. That revolutions, because everything gets up in the air, people start killing each other. Well, we're going to ask, why did the Terror happen, right? Is there anything we can learn from the French Revolution about how to avoid this kind of massacre and bloodbath in the future, right? And we've seen these bloodbaths, they happen periodically, right? In the Holocaust, or the Killing Fields, or Rwanda. These sorts of mass violence erupt from time to time. Can the French Revolution tell us about what leads to that, what causes that, right? And so some people are going to have theories about what causes revolutions. They're going to say this is the important thing, or this is the important thing. Some people are going to have theories about what causes the terror and that kind of bloodbath, that kind of violence. Other people are going to say, well, this thing or that thing or whatever. So we're going to be asking those two big questions, but we're also going to ask, what did the revolution accomplish? What actually is the result of the French Revolution? Because some people have said the French Revolution accomplished very little. Some people said it changed everything. I started this lecture by saying it was a watershed moment. It changed everything, right? But what did it change? So we're going to be asking, what did the French Revolution actually accomplish? Right? So now, to answer these big questions, you need a theory. And historians have various theories, and some historians will tell you they don't have theory, and we'll talk about that approach also. But basically, even historians who say they don't have a theory do have a theory. Because a theory is essentially a set of assumptions about what are the important forces or factors driving change in history, right? And there's a bunch of underlying assumptions there. Number one, you have to have assumptions about human nature. If you think human beings are just naturally violent and they're always going to be violent, then the question of why did the terror happen is well, duh, human beings are violent. They do that all the time. But if you think that human beings are naturally not violent, then you need a theory for what can happen to turn human beings from not violent to violent and have that much bloodshed. So your assumptions about human nature are going to have important effects on what you think are the answers you have for what causes revolution, what causes the terror, etc. So you have to people have assumptions about human nature, and these assumptions about human nature go further than just are they violent or not. You might ask, well, how much do human beings, how much do they have free will, right? Some people think human beings are really rational and they think about everything and they choose what they think is best and they do it. Other people say human beings are driven by psychological needs and urges that are subconscious, and they're not aware of why they make the decisions they do, and they don't act rationally. They're acting out of psychological urges and needs and processes. Well, those two assumptions, those two visions of human nature, are going to lead you to very different directions when you're talking about, what causes the terror or what causes a revolution. Because if you think human beings have free will and are rational, then you have to explain why they made the rational choice to do this. But if you think human beings are driven by psychological urges and needs, then you have to come up with an explanation for why the psychological forces driving human beings led to that outcome, right? But there are other things beyond just that sort of basic idea of human nature. So, I mean, your assumptions about human nature are going to lead you towards certain theories or away from certain theories, right? But there's also that people have ideas about social action. And what I mean by that is that human beings as individuals often seem unique and kind of unpredictable perhaps, or they have free will, they can make their own choices. But if you look at human beings as a group, often human beings seem to be pretty predictable, or at least pretty uniform and homogeneous. And so this is kind of a paradox, right? Because we all think, oh, I walk through life and I have free will and I can do whatever I want and I make my own choices based on what I like. And yet, and that should lead to everybody being completely different. And yet you can really categorize people into groups. And you can say, yeah, well, if somebody likes this and this, they probably are also going to do that, and that, right? And so in large groups, we can often say things about human beings that you can't say about an individual, because individuals are kind of unpredictable, but in large groups, human beings tend to average out to being predictable. And one way to think about this is to think about, think about music, right? You can make a pretty good, if you were to think about all the different types of music, right? Let's say take Keith Urban and Taylor Swift and Drake and Beyonce and Lady Gaga and Miles Davis and I don't know, I'm running out of stuff here, but if you take all those different types of music, you can pretty much lump them together, right? If I said somebody is a big Keith Urban fan and they love Faith Hill, right? Those are country music stars. Can you say anything else about that person? Right? And not each individual, but can you say something in general about the people who like country music? You probably can, right? Just as you can probably say some things in general about people who like rap music, or in general about people who like pop music, or in general about people who like death metal. They tend to have a type, right? And so when you're talking about groups, and each individual, there might be some nun in a convent somewhere who's really into death metal. She doesn't fit the type. But if you look at all the people who like death metal, they tend to have a whole bunch of similarities. They tend to like the color black. They tend to like tattoos. There's all sorts of things you could point to. And if you look at country music, people who follow country music or love country music, you probably can say something in general about how they dress and what kind of, vehicles they drive and et cetera, what their income is perhaps, things like that. And so human beings in groups are often sort of predictable and easily described, but human beings as individuals, it kind of seems to break down. So one of the things historians are going to ask is, what makes human beings act in groups in predictable ways? What is it? What can we say about human beings in groups and how they're going to behave? That's different than how individuals behave. But if you can say, for instance, that, given the right opportunity, the working class is going to rise up and overthrow the government, that's an important thing to know in history. And if you can say the middle class will never do that, that's also an important thing to know in history, right? So one of the things historical theory does is it tries to come up with ways to describe human action in groups, okay? And in particular, when you're talking about human beings in groups, you want to say, what are some of the forces driving people in groups? What are some of the things driving behavior in groups? And I'm going to give you several different, we're going to have several theories, but I'm just going to give you a brief outline. One is the so-called Marxist theory, which is that people in groups are basically driven by economic factors. Their social class, their income, whether they're employed by somebody else or they're self-employed, whether they own a factory or they just work in a factory. Those are the things that govern everything about people acting in groups, according to a Marxist. Okay? But there are other people, I'm going to call them the post-structuralists, who say, no, 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 really what shapes the way people act in groups is the culture that they have gives them certain ideas and certain ways of understanding the world and certain ways of seeing the world, and that culture shapes the behavior of groups. And so you really have to understand the culture and the logic of the culture to understand why people did that. It's not about economics. Economics is part of that, but it's about the culture and the ideas and the understandings for how society works that shape the way people behave. Right? So Marxists would say, no, 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 it's all about economics and social class, etc. And post-structuralists say, no, 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 it's all about culture and language and the way people articulate ideas and think about ideas, etc. So those are two different explanations for what historical theories, and they will give you different explanations for what causes the revolution, what caused the terror, etc. We're going to be looking at those. Right? Now, there are other people who say, well, you know what? Human beings are never actually groups. Human beings are always individual human beings, and they act according to their own desires. And so some people would deny the whole premise. They would say, you can't talk about human beings acting some way in groups. You can only talk about human beings acting certain ways as individuals. Right? And so some historians would say, you don't want to talk about groups and large things like culture or social class, etc., because that actually doesn't predict what people actually do, because each person is an individual and they can do what they want to do. They can do their own thing, right? So what we're going to be doing then is we're going to be looking at the French Revolution. We're going to talk about the facts. Here's what happened in the French Revolution. And then we're going to say, how do different historical theories, Marxist, post-structuralist, what I call the contingency theory, how do they explain what happened in the French Revolution? And in particular, one of the things that comes out of historical theory is this, that history is full of facts. We have a lot of facts, right? We know all sorts of things. I mean, really, just we could probably, there are people who died 500 years ago, and we happen to know what they ate for breakfast every day of their life, right? We have way too much information in some cases, way too little in others. But somehow historians have to say, we can't look at every bit of information, right? Because then we're putting, the fact that Louis XVI got executed in January of 1793 as one fact right alongside the fact that, George Washington had wooden teeth, which he probably didn't. But those two are not equally important. But we have to be able to decide which one's more important and why, right? And historical theory is the way we do that, because some historical theories will say, let's look at these facts because these facts are important. And then a different historical theory say, no, 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 look at those facts because those facts are important. And so, for instance, if you're a Marxist, I said they think economics and social class drives everything in history. So for a Marxist, when they see somebody do something in the French Revolution, they're going to say, what social class are they from? What's their relationship to economics? Because that'll explain why they did what they did. But a post-structuralist, somebody who says, it's about language and culture, they're going to say, no, no, let's look at the words that they use, the language they use, and see how that shaped their thought processes and the ideas from the culture that shaped their thought process so we can understand why they acted. So a Marxist historian is going to be looking at things like facts about social class and what social class are these people from who are doing these things. And they're going to look at that set of facts, those facts. And a post-structuralist is going to say, no, no, let's look at the language and the ideas and the words they use, because that'll explain the culture. Let's look at those facts. Right? So historical theory pushes us to look at one set of facts or another set of facts. And that's actually really valuable, because historical theory, because, if you think all facts are equal, it gets kind of hard to, you're drowning in facts. What are you what do you look at, right? When I was in graduate school, I was looking at French newspapers, and, you can go, newspapers have an enormous amount of words in them every day, and they just come out every day. And how do you, as a historian, you want to go look at what's important in 1936, how do you figure out what's important? All right, there's all that information, and it's not just you can do headlines and whatever, and that tells you something. It tells you what they thought was important, but you might think something else is important, right? But how do you decide? So historical theory can help us decide which facts are the ones we should focus on or give attention to, right? So historical theory can orient us and say, yeah, this is how we should be approaching this. And these are the facts we want to look at. But historical theory can also do other things. For one thing, if a historical theory says, here's why revolutions happen, a good historical theory will then give you some idea of what to look at in the future if you want to find out if a revolution is coming. A good historical theory will help you predict the future because it'll say, these are the things that drive revolutions, and so we can look at those particular things in the future, in our present, and see if there's something coming in the future. And so a good historical theory will help us not just figure out which facts in the past are important and look at those, but also which facts are important in the present, and they can help us predict the future. All right. So historical theory can be powerful. Now, a lot of people would argue that historical theory also has drawbacks, and it does. And one thing is, historical theory, by making you focus on one thing, it can make you expect to see something that might not be there, right? If you, they do this in like movies a lot, is that you expect to see one thing and then they present you with something else and it shocks you. You're scared. And this can happen in history also, in that if you're a Marxist historian and you're really focused on economic stuff, you might miss some of the other stuff that's important that's going on because it's not economic. Or if you're a post-structuralist and you're focused on language and ideas and culture, you might miss some of the economic things or other things that are important. So historical theory is kind of a double-edged sword. It can be really powerful in helping to focus us on what's important and helping us to predict the future and really understand what's driving events, but it can also lead us in the wrong direction if it's not good historical theory. And it can force us to miss things that we might have noticed otherwise. So we're going to be looking at historical theory in the course overall. And we're going to be applying it to the French Revolution. So that's going to be the overall, orientation of the course. I'm going to be posting lectures in the course 5 days a week. So every day I'll post a lecture by noon every day, and then, presumably you'll watch it later that afternoon. I'll be posting it on YouTube under, the channel Paul Shu, and there will be a playlist for the French Revolution, so you can just go through that, and I'll keep them in order for you. And I'm also going to be posting lectures where I talk about the readings. Now, I don't have one for Monday. There's no readings, so there won't be a second lecture for that. But I'll call those reading lectures or reading discussions, and I'll be posting videos of that on YouTube also, where I will talk about the specific readings that were assigned for that day. I might not post them if I'm talking about the Hansen reading, because that one is fairly self-explanatory. But for the King Took Flight and the Terror and all the handouts, I will be posting discussions where I talk about what's going on in these readings. Because in some cases, it's pretty hard to figure out what the historical theory is that's underlying these. But that's the overall idea. So going forward, I will post a lecture about the French Revolution. I'll just be narrating the French Revolution, what happened in the French Revolution, in lectures as we go forward. And then I'll post a second lecture that talks about the readings every day, if there's a reading that I think is particularly important to discuss. So that's it for lecture number 1 for Monday, April 27th for the French Revolution. I will see you next time.